If you've ever been in corporate before and you've had like a scary experience, maybe you had to make a decision or you felt as if you really, really had to make a new decision to make a change, then I think this episode where I get to meet with the amazing Steve Ware is going to be really interesting for you and really exciting for you because Steve, as I, used to be in corporate in one of the big tech companies and he had a really scary wake up call. And I want to hear his story on how kind of like what he made out of that scary wake up call and how he turned that into an opportunity instead. So hi, Steve. Welcome to Josefine Meets. I'm super excited to have you here as my guest on today's show.
Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
So you and I connected on LinkedIn, Steve, as most of my Josefine Meets people have actually done, because that is the platform where you can connect with people, really connect with people. And that is also where I heard your story the first time. So Steve, can you take us a little bit back to where you started and what kind of kicked off? We will get into what you're currently doing, but let's start with that, where you were back then and how that wake up call, how that looked like.
Yeah, so we'll get into what I teach now, I guess, but back, I joined IBM when I was a kid. I joined IBM when I was 18 in 1992, so straight out of college, and did my degree with them, and everything was great, fine, liked it. And then after being with them for about 20 years, the pressure got too much, I guess, and I felt really anxious all the time. And my sleep went from brilliant to horrendous. And my anxiety levels went from kind of normal to always high. And so I kind of, I guess you'd call it burned out. I was really struggling, and then I needed something. I needed something that was gonna, I can remember just thinking, oh, will I ever feel peaceful again? I honestly thought that, that peace you have when you're a kid, when your biggest worry is like just your mum saying you got to stop playing and come in, and the freedom you feel when you're a kid and you're just out running around, playing a sport maybe, or just doing what you love when you're a kid. I'd lost that not a care in the world feeling completely. And life felt so serious and heavy and serious.
Had it snuck up on you? Like, was it just like,
no,
like the story about kind of like boiling the frog and all of a sudden the frog was dead? Was that how it felt like?
Yeah, looking back, yeah. So I kind of, I was feeling it a little bit, but I just sort of buried it. I was a very macho guy. So I thought it felt like weakness to me. It felt like not being strong enough or good enough. It felt like, I'd lose my job if I couldn't handle the pressure, all these kind of things. So I did my best to run away from it, to bury it, to do anything to avoid it for years. And then it came to a point where I couldn't avoid it anymore. And then I really had to do something. And I can remember somebody at IBM saying to me, "Why don't you try mindfulness?" And I won't say the exact words I said to them, but they were pretty strong, and it just felt like nothing to me. It felt like BS. It felt like I was busy, right? I don't have time to sit for 20 minutes doing nothing. Isn't that what meditation is? Doing nothing. I had too much to do already. I didn't need anything else to add to my to-do list. So I instantly dismissed that as not for me. But the interesting thing is there was a tiny bit of my brain that thought, do you know what? It's been around 2,500 years. Maybe you don't know everything, Steve.
So you had probably Googled it then to know that, because I didn't know that it had been around for 2,500 years. So you probably had come across it somehow.
Yeah,
it had piqued your interest somehow.
Yeah, there was almost an internal battle going on in my head. The vast majority was saying, it's rubbish, it won't help you. And it came up with all sorts of reasons why it wouldn't help me, right? All the way from it's a load of rubbish, it doesn't do anything, all the way to the other end of the spectrum, which is if you get too good at it, you'll check out from life. You won't be, you'll just be this passive blob that just meditates, and they'll be saying, IBM, don't give any work to Steve because he just chills out all day. He doesn't do any real work anymore. Isn't that interesting that my brain came up with both thoughts, trying to cover all bases? Like my brain's saying, we don't want to do this. The real reason was I was scared, actually.
Yeah, of course reason. It was some kind of fear, maybe the fear of loss of a little bit like status also in the business. We can't give Steve this.
But I think a bigger fear was just, did I want to sit with my mind? Did I want to sit and be quiet and look at the thoughts in my head? Did I want to sit and feel this fear? No, of course I didn't. It feels horrible.
I actually read a study, or not the study, but an article about a study where they had asked men and women, would you prefer getting electrical shock or to sit with your thoughts for 5 minutes?
Yeah.
Most men, I can't remember, with like a massive percentage said, I'd prefer the electrical shock.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because you know what you're dealing with there. So electric shock's not going to kill you. It's going to hurt a little bit. Okay. You don't know what you're dealing with when you sit with your mind. Especially if your mind's been torturing you, especially if your mind doesn't let you sleep anymore, especially if your mind gets stuck in anxious loops all the time. It's a scary place to go. It takes huge courage to sit with that. So I wasn't prepared to do it. I was scared of it. But there was enough.
So what pushed you then? What was kind of like, because there must have been, I know when my fear of the unknown became less than the fear of staying in that situation. It's kind of like it's when the fears, one of them is bigger than the other.
Yeah.
What kind of made you start, I guess, experimenting, if I'm guessing, about mindfulness?
Just too much suffering, too many sleepless nights, too much anxiety. I was just sick of it. I was exhausted. I was constantly tired, and I just thought, got nothing to lose anymore, because it can't probably actually be worse than this. So I ended up downloading an app called Headspace that some people may have heard of, and I've just tried it for 10 days. And here's the thing, right? At the end of this story, we don't end this now, because the end of the story is, since then, Josefine, my life's been amazing. I just cartwheel out of bed every day, right? No problems, no stress, nothing keeps me awake ever. But there was some tiny things showed up for me, even in that 10 days, tiniest moment of half a second of peace. It was fleeting and it went, but it was there. I was like, wow, holy cow, that was, slept a tiny bit better. I can remember just something stupid. This is going to sound so stupid, but I tell you, I used to be really kind of obsessed with having the latest iPhone, and I'd keep it in pristine condition. And it was, this status thing for me. And so it was kind of part of me. That was part of my sense of self. Sounds dramatic, but I can remember finishing a meditation on a fairly sunny day downstairs, and went to pick my phone up, and it looked really dusty and a bit like not new anymore. And the thought just came into my head, that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That was a radical thought. Maybe everybody listening and watching this thinks, well, yeah, it doesn't matter. Of course it doesn't matter. And it never would have mattered to me. But that was a sign of something for me, because that was a sign of something that would have irritated me a little bit. It's not irritating me anymore. So I felt a sense of calmness, I think, from that practice. It put me in a slightly different mode, where looking at something that previously would have stressed me only a tiny bit, but still would have been a little stressor, suddenly wasn't. And I started to think, wow, maybe there's something in this. And if there is, I want to find it out. So I started reading the books. I started studying the great teachers. I started watching everything I could on YouTube and blah, blah, blah. This is in about...
When was this? Yeah, sorry. Yeah. When was this?
2012, I think. But I still didn't tell anyone, right? Because I didn't consider myself a meditator, whatever that means. Didn't want to teach. Certainly didn't want to teach it. Like, I just thought this might be something that helps me. I was already good at keeping my body fairly active through sport, and I don't drink, I don't smoke, so I was fairly healthy in that sense. But I wasn't doing anything for my mind. And I thought, I hope this is something that's going to help my mind. And so I started practicing, but didn't tell anybody. And then people at work noticed. They started to notice, and they came to me and they said, what are you doing? And when I told them, they said, can you teach us? And those 4 words probably did change my life.
Yeah.
Because I actually said no at that time, because I wasn't prepared to teach. I wasn't trained to teach. But it led me on a path to going off to University of Oxford, learning how to teach mindfulness and business, and bringing an 8-week program back into IBM. So yeah, I sometimes describe myself as the world's least likely mindfulness teacher, because I didn't sit down one day and think, I'm going to teach mindfulness. They asked me if I would teach them, and I thought, there's actually no greater gift I can give them, right? Yeah. There's nothing I could give my colleagues that was better than that.
But I think that is amazing type of entrepreneurship, because that is what you do today. We hadn't revealed that secret yet, but that is what you do today. You teach mindfulness to businesses, to bigger corporations, right?
Yeah.
So I think, isn't that kind of, it's a little bit like you slide into entrepreneurship doing something that you really, really, you know it works because you've done it yourself and you really love it too. But it wasn't this piece of, I have to become an entrepreneur. I have to find, what I need to do next. I have to figure out and to try to figure out like the big idea, the thing that will change everything. So you didn't have that stress, let's put it like that.
No, and I'd sum that up in one sentence, which says, mindfulness found me, I didn't find it.
Mm.
And I'm not an entrepreneur, I don't think. I don't know. Maybe I am. Maybe the last 3 years makes me one, but I don't consider myself a businessman. I consider myself someone who's got a real talent in teaching mindfulness to people, especially in businesses, because I understand the pressures and how people feel, who's turned it into a business rather than a businessman who's learned mindfulness.
But don't you think that also comes a little bit from this? Because if we look at your, I would say, marketing or whatever, how you spread the word about what you're doing and how you help people connect with you. You are super approachable, super easy. You share your stories. It's always a little bit touch of mindfulness, not always, but very often. And it doesn't come across as anything like, oh, you need to do this or you have to do this. So it comes very natural to you. So even if you would say, oh, I'm not an entrepreneur, but I think you have it because it is your passion, kind of.
Yeah.
It makes it easy.
Yeah. Without this passion, I would have failed. Not failed, but I would have given up on this mission a long time ago. It took me ages in IBM to get the course I ran to be approved by corporate HR. That's a massive thing to do in a company like IBM. I hit so many brick walls. So many people told me no. So many people. I would have given up on it. I would have given up on anything else. But there's something inside of me that just needs to do this, and I won't take no for an answer. And it's very unlike me. I'm a very risk-averse person. So this is, if I kind of observe my own journey in the last 3 years, it's kind of strange to watch because it's just really me.
I guess it is. Well, I guess it depends. If you would compare to the person you were in 2011, I guess 2011 end of 2012, and the person you are today, two different people.
Radically different, yeah.
And I also think if you and I spoke about this before we started recording, it's like if you would have asked me 5 years ago, don't you want to be an entrepreneur? I even remember once one of my team members saying to me, "Hey, Justin, I think you would be a really great coach." And I was like, no, they are just doing a bunch of crap. I don't want to be one. But things change.
Yeah.
And we become a bit wiser too, I would say.
Yeah, we do. And we kind of get out of our own way a little bit more.
Yeah, exactly. And what seemed important before, like the newest iPhone or whether it's dusty or not, might not be as important when we get a little bit older.
For sure.
Yeah. So what would you say? What is important to you today, Steve?
Peace of mind of everything.
What does that mean to you?
That means that I can sleep at night. It means I can not be anxious all the time. It means I can feel like I'm living rather than just existing. It feels like if I died tomorrow and was able to look back at the last 3 years, that they would have been a good use of my time and I wouldn't have thought, crap, I wish I'd done something else. So I don't have any. People say to me, what's your plan for 2, 3, 5 years? What's your business plan? And I sometimes feel guilty saying this, but I don't have like this big plan. I don't plan to exit a £30 million business in 5 years or have a team of 100 mindfulness teachers. Or what I love about what I do and what I love in life is really helping people. And I think what scares me about growing a business too big would be to lose that, would be to lose the day-to-day working directly with people, seeing them change, giving them the tools to really transform their lives, properly transform, not some like highlight for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, where we get excited together and then in 6 weeks' time you're not doing anything we talked about.
Yeah.
This is about people getting blood pressure back to normal after 10 years of hypertension. This is about people coming back to work from long-term sick ahead of time. This is about people curing lifelong insomnia. Those three things are all things that people have said to me after being on the course. And I don't think I'll ever get tired of hearing that. I won't ever get tired. I'll always get goosebumps when I get emails and feedback like that. Not because it inflates this huge sense of self that I'm Steve Ware, this amazing mindfulness teacher. Am I great? Everyone should love me. But that I played a small role in helping them on this journey and pointing them in the right direction and showing them these incredible things that I found really helped me. And they now use and really help them. So if it makes me a bunch of money and I've become very rich doing this, I'm very cool with that. But I'm not massively driven. I'm not driven by owning a Ferrari one day, or buying a £2 million house on the beach. Or if those things come to me, I'll gladly take them, but not at the cost of my well-being.
And I think it's about, setting the priorities. What is it that you really truly want? And as you say, if you're chasing the money, I think it will be really difficult to actually make a real change, because that will come true one way, especially in today's entrepreneurship as we see it. But of course, money is part of the whole thing. Of course, we don't work for free. Of course, you've studied for 11 years. Of course, that's part of the deal when people start working with you.
Yeah, of course.
So now you're not only working with IBM, you're also working with other businesses. And I think that people might be interested. Okay, so how do I get a deal with a corporation if that's what they're looking for?
If they're a solopreneur and they want to sell into a big corporate.
Yeah,
that's a tough question. So I don't do any kind of cold. I don't approach big corporates cold. I try and generate inbound leads as much as I can. So for me, it's about being my authentic self, building, if you want to call it a personal brand, call it a personal brand, but just being known as this person who can do this well, and who gives so much for free that hopefully people think, do you know what, if he gave us that much for nothing, what's it going to be like working with him?
Yeah.
I want to be that guy. I want to be the person that people think of when they think of, a stress reduction course program in their workplace that really works, that when we measure it in 6 months' time or a year's time, is still having an effect. I want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy who just goes and does keynote speeches and gets big rounds of applause and standing ovations and then leaves. Because that's, I want it to be more than that. I think I'm hyper.
But that can lead to more. I mean, that's where you would show, they would get kind of like a piece of nugget from you and your brilliance and what you can do. And as we get to enjoy you here now too. And that can lead, because we all need these little bit touch points, right?
Yes.
But I totally understand that you don't want to, travel from city to city to city and just do these keynote speeches, because that is not going to change unless someone follows you on the tour. There are probably groupies that could follow you doing that too. But I mean, then we would change one or maybe two groupies' lives instead of changing a business's life.
Right, exactly. Like I've in the last 10, 11 years, certainly in the last decade, I can think of only one person who was so motivated, and this is a guy at IBM actually, who was so motivated by the keynote that I did, that he went away and he bought a book and he studied the book, and there's an 8-week program in there, and he did it every day. And he wrote to me 2 months later and he said, "You don't know who I am. I was at your presentation in IBM." And he said, something inside me just really resonated. And he said, I went away, and this is the guy who had pre-hypertension for 10 years and it came back to normal. And there was a whole bunch of stuff he wrote, and it was one of the most incredible emails I've ever received. But that is a rare thing.
You don't know that. Just because they don't write you an email, you don't know what you're doing to them.
No,
not everyone writes an email saying, "Hey, Steve, thank you so much for your keynote speech changed my life.
Yeah, I think you're right. I'm probably too paranoid about this. And one of the things I say is nobody ever got fit by listening to a talk on fitness, right?
Yeah.
Nobody.
Yeah. Yeah.
And most people, for most people, a keynote on mindfulness, as brilliant as they are, and I do them, and you're right, they're to get a taste of this, right? They're the movie trailer, they're not the movie. But don't just come to the movie trailers, all I'm saying.
Yeah.
Don't just come to the talk about fitness and then think you're fitter than you were as you drive home and stop at McDonald's on the way, right?
Yeah.
Because you're not. And so I think I've been burned a little bit by businesses that think that it could be a tick box exercise, that if they get me in for a keynote, they're done. That's the only thing I'm saying. We're not done. We're starting with a keynote, and then where do we go from there? It's not everything. The keynote can't possibly be everything.
It's a little bit like the hot topic, like diversity and inclusion, and they have that box in the org chart and somewhere down underneath HR somewhere. But yeah, definitely making it bigger. But you will always have those. It's also like, businesses promising, 100K if you just show up to a workshop and you will get 100K, whatever. You will always have those people who also want, the quick fixes and the quick wins.
Of course, we all want them.
Yeah.
I want them.
So if someone would start with mindfulness, and you mentioned Headspace, and I know the app too, and how else would you say, well, just start with this tiny little step, because that's the thing, right? We taking huge leaps will overwhelm us, but what are the tiny steps that someone could take?
So the kind of tiny steps I teach people on courses would be, the first thing we come to appreciate when we start to learn mindfulness is that most people are doing it, or it's happening to them at some point in their lives. And these tend to be the greatest moments of their days and their lives. So, for example, I would say to people, think about, and anyone watching this can do it right now, think about one moment in your life, or many moments, where you either felt kind of a deep peace, just a real, when you sometimes just, if you could kind of visualize it or express it, you just be like, the way the world lives, for half a second, you're just like, wow. Maybe this time of year, people have experienced it on holiday. You fly somewhere nice, you're on a beach, after 3 days.
Or they need it after the holiday, who knows?
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
But you feel that beautiful sense of peace. So maybe you felt very peaceful and you were still somewhere, lying on the beach doing something. Maybe you felt very peaceful, but you were doing something active. Maybe you're doing a sport, skiing, mountain climbing, riding a bike, whatever. Or maybe you noticed real beauty in something. Maybe you noticed a beautiful sunset, or an animal could do this. Now, all these things have one thing in common. If people zoom all the way in, really, really close, and look at when they experience that beautiful nanosecond or half a second of peace, and it will probably be quite brief, right? What we find is, when you zoom in and you look at this tiny moment of peace, you realize that our thinking minds have actually stopped. And that's what makes it feel amazing. So when you're lying on your beach and you go, for 1 second, your mind has stopped thinking. And when your mind stopped thinking, everything's better. Because you don't have any problems anymore. You don't even know your own name or your email address or phone number. Everything's gone, right? You're there. You're alive. You're awake. You're probably more alive, awake than ever. So we're not talking about being sedated here, or falling into sleep, or drinking 10 whiskeys so that we can stop thinking that way, or smoking something. We're not falling below thinking here. We're actually rising above thinking, and we do it naturally in our lives. So the most beautiful, they're the things everyone loves to do. Maybe when people play a sport and they say, God, for 1 hour a week, I go and play football. I don't care about anything. I'm just running around the football pitch. Plenty of sports stars that have been alcoholics and gamblers and drug abusers will tell you that the one space in their life, their one time in their life when they're at peace totally, when they're playing the sport. Why? Because you can't think and play sport very well. You're acting on your instincts, and you're alive and you're awake and you're performing. But if you start thinking, especially at a high level, the ball's gone. There's no room for conceptual thinking in sport in that sense. So people figure out really early, okay, yeah. When I noticed that beautiful sunset, for 2 seconds, my mind was still. Maybe the mind comes in really quickly afterwards and starts chatting and saying, I need to take a picture. I need to post this on Instagram. I need to talk about it on LinkedIn. But the mind's come in by then. And if you look, the piece is slowly fading as soon as the mind comes in. So we realize quite quickly that the most beautiful moments of our life, most of them, coincide with having a mind that's either fairly still or completely quiet. And of course, that's what lets us sleep at night. The quieter our mind, the better we sleep. So we learn that. That's just a fundamental thing. And most people can accept that. Okay, so I'm kind of practicing mindfulness already. I'm not deliberately doing it, but it happens every now and then, or it happens at least when I go on a holiday, or when I go down and I stroke my dog in the morning for 3 seconds, I can be quiet with her and it's beautiful. And so then we figure out the biggest problem in the world, which is we cannot stop our minds by trying to stop our minds. And I mean, if you wanted to, we could try it now just to prove that. I mean, just for 10 seconds or 20 seconds. I often say to people, let's just take 20 seconds, but don't have a single thought in that 20 seconds. You mustn't. You mustn't think about this video. You mustn't think about what you have for breakfast. You mustn't even have the thought, I've stopped thinking, because that's another thought. You mustn't have the thought, is that 20 seconds yet? Because there's another thought. You mustn't count. Right, so it's really hard. And when we do that, if anyone wants to try and do it after they've listened to this video, just time yourself 20 seconds. Try and do it without thinking. Most people, if they've not been taught how not to think, the mind just goes mad.
But you, as an expert now, can you stop your thoughts for 20 seconds? Can you do that?
Yeah, for 20 seconds I probably could, yeah. Not for massively long periods. So the next thing I would do is show people ways of stilling their mind. And one way, very simply, we could do it together right now. One way of stopping your mind is to become so focused, really alert, highly focused. And I want you to just notice, as you're listening to me, I'll slow down a tiny bit, make it easier. I just want you to notice the breath coming in and out of your body. So you don't need to change your breath, but can you, for a couple of breaths, even while I'm talking, sense it? And what do I mean by sense it? I'll describe it out loud for anyone watching. As I breathe in, fairly cool. I can feel fairly cool air at the nostrils. And I'm staying with it now. It takes concentration, but I can stay with it. So as it keeps going, I can see it go past the throat. Very rarely do people notice that, but I can sense it. I can sense the air going past the throat. Keep watching, keep alert. Chest expands a little bit. If I'm really alert in this area, I can sense my heart beating. And then I follow all the way down still. And in my belly, I can feel the belly expand. And then it contracts. And the breath comes back up. And if I stay with it, then there's slightly warmer air as I breathe out. Here's the thing, right? The greatest mindfulness teacher in the world, in my opinion, is a guy called Eckhart Tolle. Some people may have heard of him. He's written books called The Power of Now, etc. He says this, is this true in your experience? A human being cannot be fully aware of the sensation of breath entering and leaving their body and think at the same time.
But the thing is, when you said, I hadn't thought about my breath probably the whole day until you said, now let's, and it's the same thing when I do my evening meditation and thing, and it's like, now you start like focusing on your breath, on how you breathe, right?
Yeah.
You automatically swapped. Even if I didn't do that, but if I would have done a list of, shop, what do I need to shop for the groceries? When you say we're now focusing on breathing, the mind immediately switches. And then you say, now you sense like how the air is cold when you, sensing that. It's so you kind of, it's a guiding. You guide my thoughts rather than that I stop thinking. You kind of guide in a way that I'm supposed to think.
So let's be super clear on the language then. It may sound like I'm being pedantic, but I'm not. I'm not guiding your thoughts. I'm not asking you to think about your breath.
No. I don't mean that you're guiding my thoughts. I mean that is how my thoughts operate. I follow your guidance. That's what I mean. I'm not saying that you're kind of like manipulating me or anything. It's more that, the focus might have been like all these action lists and to-do lists and blah, blah, blah. But when we hear a guided meditation or someone guiding us, we shut that off.
Yeah,
The
well, we
whole
shift.
chatter.
It's like, yeah, we shift into a different mode, so we're no longer thinking. A
Mm-hmm.
lot of people will misuse the word. Very normal thing to do. Misuse the word thinking. So I'm thinking about my breath when I'm meditating. You're not thinking. The thinking part of your brain isn't active there, but you're aware of the sensation of your breath entering and leaving your body, and this is the crux of mindfulness.
Yeah, but I was thinking. I'm arguing a little bit with you here, sir, Steve. I was thinking, yeah, the air is colder when you breathe in. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're right. Yeah, it's colder. That's what I'm
Okay, so your mind was just
thinking.
active thinking. That's fine.
Yeah.
But was there any moment in that minute, however long it took us, was there any moment where you just were aware of the sensation of the breath and your mind wasn't asking yourself, can you notice this? Yes, I can. Can you notice this in your body? Oh, yeah, I know.
Probably. Yeah.
Okay,
Probably.
so that's what
Yeah.
we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Now, if your mind was chattering the whole of the time and saying, this is boring, this is rubbish, this isn't going to do anything. Can I notice this breath's cold? What's the point of this? This is rubbish. That's fine.
No. Yeah. No.
If that had happened, that's fine too, right? None of this is not okay. But you could just be aware of how much your mind is thinking.
Yeah.
But what we're looking for here is the knowing that when we truly connect with our breath in a way that we are aware of the sensation of it, our minds have to be quiet because we can't do both things at once. And if we've been pulled back into thinking, that's okay. But what it means is we've lost awareness of our breath. So we just come back. That's the practice. So these are true ways of stilling our minds, of quietening our minds, of practicing placing our attention somewhere other than thinking, anchoring our attention somewhere. And of course, we'll get drawn back into thinking because the mind loves to think and it will pull our attention back. Our mind doesn't like not to be into control and not think, so it will grab it quite quickly. And then we notice that and we come back, and we notice it and we come back. But the power of this, it doesn't seem like anything big when you first tell people, but the power, could you imagine if you're someone who suffered with bad sleep, could you imagine having a way of stopping your thinking mind at night?
I think we've all had sleepless nights. I had one, by the way, last night. And I think that is the release that we're then looking for. So
right.
How can I stop the chatter? Yeah. Super powerful.
Yeah. So there's good news and bad news. The good news is it's possible, certainly to minimize the amount of chatter in your head. The bad news is it takes practice, which is why which we're back to why don't I just like delivering keynotes? Because I can't, even if I tell you this in however long we're talking today, this isn't going to be enough. If someone's listening to this and they go to bed tonight and they go, oh, I'm so glad I watched that video with Steve because my sleep's been awful for the last 3 nights. And I'm going to practice what he did. I'm going to lie in bed tonight and I'm going to watch my breath. And they watch it for 2 breaths and the mind comes in and says, screw that.
Yeah, nothing happens.
You've got stuff to worry about. You've got to worry about paying this bill tomorrow. This didn't do anything. Has that solved your emails? No, of course it hasn't. So the mind comes in and then you get so swept away and you wake and you get up tomorrow and you say, that mindfulness is a load of crap. Doesn't do anything. I tried it last night. Doesn't work. We're back to fitness. That's the equivalent of me taking somebody who's very unfit and then expecting to run a marathon tomorrow. So we've got to practice this stuff when we're not challenged. There's loads of ways we can practice it in our lives. We can practice this during any moment. We can practice it when we're brushing our teeth, when we're taking a shower, when we're walking our dog, when we're walking upstairs, when we're putting the bins out, when we're eating. You can always practice this stuff. It's a case of taking our attention and placing it in our senses and being fully present for that, slowing the mind down, realizing that we don't need to be thinking all the time, realizing that thinking's hurting us, that we're doing too much of it, realizing that in this day and age, 90% of most people's thinking is repetitive and useless. 90%. 90.
Crazy.
It's just garbage thinking. Most of the chatter in our heads is garbage. And we would love to put it down, which is why you look at all the ways people try and put it down. I have a drink after work, that calms me down. I smoke cigarettes, that calms me down. I smoke weed, that calms me down. I try and keep myself ultra busy to distract myself from the fact that my mind's going crazy. Everyone's trying things all day, every day to try and quiet their minds. You just got to look around you to see that. There are some healthier ways you can practice this stuff. But the challenge most people don't appreciate, even though it's obvious, is that it does take some practice, right?
Like everything.
Yeah,
It really
like
does.
everything.
If we want to change a habit or change a way,
Absolutely.
we can't just do it once and then we
Absolutely.
have, six pack or whatever.
Right.
I'd like to round this off, Steve. This has been brilliant. I really loved what you have taught us here. I really loved what you've shared. Your story is amazing. How you can like almost a little bit stumble on becoming an entrepreneur, doing something you thought, oh, this is nothing for me, and really become a specialist as an expert on it. So if someone is watching this and they are thinking like, you know what, Steve could actually be a keynote speaker. I'm just kidding. No,
You can,
yeah. No, but I mean, that is the thing, right? Give them a taste of,
yeah.
like you did here, give them a taste of how can people get in touch with you the best way, Steve?
So let me, just before I answer that question, let me go back to the keynote, because I don't want people to misunderstand. The first thing I actually do with business is, if you had a business of however many people and you said, we're interested in what you do, Steve, the first thing I would say is, let's get anyone who's even remotely interested in this together for an hour. And it'll be fairly similar to this hour, right? We'll talk about the journeys, we'll talk about how the biggest companies in the world use mindfulness, what works for me, but then there'll be a real experiential part to it, so people start to understand. And then at the end of that hour, people go, I want this. And then we say, okay, well, this is what we can offer you now. 6-week course, 8-week course, whatever. So a keynote is a fundamental start. And it's a great job of filtering people in an organization to see where the levels of interest are. So it's absolutely a valid thing to do. The easiest two places to find me would be my website, which is just stevewaremindfulness.com, or LinkedIn. I'm very active on LinkedIn as well. So if you just search Steve Ware mindfulness, you'll find me on there too.
We will also make sure that we add your links in the show notes to this, so that people really can, not have to go search for you, because that is another thing that happens. We watch a video, get a brilliant idea, think, oh, this Steve Ware, this guy, he knows his stuff, and then we forget about it. So when you're watching this video, make sure you take action immediately. Connect with Steve. That doesn't mean that you will become a mindfulness expert within the next couple of days. It might mean that you will become a mindfulness person later down the road. But make sure you connect with Steve, because he has some brilliant things to teach and to share. So thank you so much, Steve, for being an amazing guest on my show.
Thank you very much.
And for you who's watching this, please make sure you subscribe to the show, because Steve is only one of many really cool and inspirational guests that I have on. If you also know someone who you think would really be an amazing guest too, please let me know. And I'm also happy to connect with you guys. So thank you so much for watching, and see you soon again.